So listen, let me give you some information. Shh, you guys should all have page 71 out, okay? We have one example to do in the notes. Okay, so after notes homework is when I'll do the optional retake quiz. I'll give you guys some time to study because notes are not going to take really long, and you have one homework problem, and you'll get that done, and you'll still have probably half the class left, okay? So here's all the things, so please listen. Here's all the things that you have the option of doing once the homework's done. Some of you might be taking the quiz if you are choosing to do that. You can work on any of your old homeworks because we have a homework check tomorrow, so you want to be ready for that. Tomorrow's when we start our test review, but I have those ready for you, and so I will offer those to you. If you want to start working on that today, you'll have a lot of time to start working on it, but it's not assigned until tomorrow. So those are lots of things that you can be doing, but I have to tell you, this is such a big, like I'm excited about teaching this lesson, because I'll tell you why in a minute, okay? So do me a favor and be on 71. We're going to do this first example together. This is similar to what we did yesterday. There were a lot of absences yesterday, so try to follow along. In case you get lost, just know you'll need to watch that video from yesterday. And then I will show you what's on that green piece of paper. It's big, it's huge, it's super important, okay? I'll get to that in a minute. All right, so let's look at example 1. The figure at the right shows the depth of water along a seawall. The depth is 5 feet at low tide and 11 feet at high tide. And on a given day, low tide occurs at 6 a.m. and high tide at noon. So being Floridians, this is kind of language we're used to, but it's in real world language, like low tide and high tide. What could we translate low and high to in math language? Min and max, right? So we have a min of 5, which occurs at 6 a.m. That was given to us, and a max of 11 feet that occurs at noon. Okay, so just being able to pull some information out of a word problem and kind of interpret it mathematically, important. The graph is already made for us. Our y-axis is the depth in feet, and the x-axis is the number of hours after midnight. So if you guys have ever seen or heard of military time, and I see this in word problems a lot involving time. So like in the U.S., we say we have a 3 a.m. and a 3 p.m. And so you, on a graph, you can't do 3 and 3. That wouldn't make sense. So that's why we use military time, basically saying this is noon and this is 15 hours after midnight or 3 hours after noon. So 15 is 3 o'clock and so on, okay? So that's what that means. And you can see there's a min, there's that max that we just talked about, 6 a.m. It was a height of 5 feet, and at noon it's 11 feet. It's already graphed for us. What we are tasked with doing is writing an equation of cosine in this form. And it tells us we need A, we need B, and we need D. So A is the amplitude, B we get from our period, D is the midline, right? And notice they left off C. C is our phase shift, C is our starting point. So if there is no C, that means we start at 0. So the graph should match the pattern of cosine, starting at 0. And it does, right? So we have up, middle, down, middle, up. Perfect. Here's the thing. You have to, at this point, know the order of the graphs. So let's just talk about that real quick. Sine always starts in the middle. Always. Middle, up, middle, down, middle. Or if there's a flip, it's still middle. It's just middle, down, middle, up, middle, down. So sine, middle, okay? Cosine starts up, middle, down, middle, up. So cosine starts up, or if there's a flip, it starts down, okay? So this is really important. Sine always starts in the middle. Cosine always starts up unless there's a flip and then it starts down, okay? So we're all good there. As I told you guys yesterday, I always start with my midline. It's always really easy to find right in the middle. It's where, when I say up middle, it's the y value I hit every time I say middle. So in this case, it's 8. And the midline leads me to what? What does the midline help me find? amplitude, right? So my amplitude is from my midline to the max or midline to the min. Either one, it's the same distance. So we're at 8 and we're going up to 11, right? 8 to 11 would be 3. And since our pattern is up, middle, down, middle, up, there's no flip. So A will be positive 3, okay? All that's left now is B. So we have to start by finding the period, right? The period is how much of the x-axis we use to make 5 points. Any 5 points, but if we have the option of starting at 0, why wouldn't we, right? So we go from 0 to 12. That's 1 period. So what is our period? Let me just remind you, let me tell you something. I think you guys all know the period is 12, right? From 0 to 12. It's always the number furthest to the right minus the number to the left, because that's going to be important in what we do next. But starting at 0, it's just 12. You don't really do any math. But that's not our B value. B would be 2 pi divided by the period. Nothing's changed, guys. We've been finding B in the period over and over. 2/12 is a fraction you should be able to simplify without a calculator. So divide them both by 2, we get 1 over 6. Ready to write our answer. So D of t equals the A cosine. There's only one number going into parentheses, so I'm not going to bother with brackets. Pi over 6. I'm just using the letters they have. Okay. So that's the equation that models this graph. And then you could use this equation, you could use this model, you could use the graph to find where the tide is rising. You know, from 6 to 12 we're rising. That would happen again at, what is that? That's it, yeah, from 6 a.m. to noon, and then 6 o'clock p.m. to midnight. So it just keeps repeating. That's when high tide would be, low tide, and so on. Okay, or when it's I should say when the tide is rising, not when it's high tide or low tide, as it's going up. Okay, so this is very similar to what we did yesterday, and sadly, bad teacher, I gave you way too many pieces of paper for section 7. So if you're someone that's burdened by a lot of paper in your binder and you're always looking for ways to get it limited, that's the only page we're using of section 7. So there's a lot there. I'm sorry. I wrote myself a note not to print that next year. Okay, so don't be mad at me. All right. I mean, I make extra work for myself. This got cut off. It says 3.7. But I do it for you. Wait till you hear all I've done for you. Here in a minute, I'll tell you. Okay. Listen. Listen to me now. This is important. We're about to do 2 problems, identical types of problems, just different numbers. Listen. Notes, and then homework but classwork. So same 3 types of problems. There's also 2 of these in your test review and 2 on your test. You know how I give you multiple choice and an FRQ, multiple choice and FRQ on the test? Both FRQs are just like this, okay? That's how important they are. They are really easy. As long as you just learn it from me now, you are going to be like, I got these FRQs in the bag, okay? What these FRQs are a portion of the FRQ you will be taking on the AP exam, okay? A portion, I say. So I have here, so each year, College Board will release the FRQs that students took. So like around September, they've made these available to everyone. If you were a grader like I was, you know, we had to see them over the summer. And so this is, good gracious. If you are, if you can see, I'll try and zoom in. This is exactly the FRQ. This is FRQ 3 that my students took last summer. This is the actual one. And we'll use it and when we start doing mock exams and stuff to practice. This is the whole FRQ. What's missing from ours, notice it starts at B. What you're missing for the next week, I'm not doing this part of it, is the part A, where you get a picture and a word problem. We did one like of a Ferris wheel or something before. But anyway, there's a picture and a word problem, and then it starts part B, and that's the rest of it that you are going to see here. So when it comes time to do FRQ3, you actually have to come up with the ordered pairs for this graph that matches the word problem. We're actually starting a little ahead where somebody's already found the ordered pairs for you. You don't have to read a word problem and identify what all those numbers would be and put them on here. That's already done for you. But the rest of this is exactly what you'll see on my test is coming up next week and on the AP exam after the word problem. So when it comes time for me and you to start reviewing that top part, which is tricky, reading a word problem is always tough. After that, this is going to be the easy part for you. You guys are all going to scoot through this really, really easily, okay? So let me explain what we have here. And the directions for these, for this part, this part, is always the same. So it's the same directions over and over. So let's just read it one time to really understand it. The graph of H, they're calling this H, and it's dashed midline. They're telling you already, here's your midline, okay? For 2 full cycles is shown, so 10 points here, 5. 5 points, F, G, J, K, P. On the AP exam, they use the same 5 letters. They don't mean anything. They picked letters that really have nothing to do with anything else to try not to let you think it's a hint or anything. It's just naming 5 points by letters to make it easier. And this is the part right here that put fear in all of us AP pre-calc teachers. No scales indicated and no axes are presented. We don't have an x-axis. We don't have a y-axis. This is not actually like drawn on the coordinate plane. All we have is a line showing where the max is, right? These are my max points. You can see up to 1. Oh, sorry. You can just see the max line is 1.75. The min, it's just this line that's showing where the minimum points are, and then the midline, okay? I'm going to be honest with you guys, which is a little vulnerable of me. It's not really nice. I don't know why I'm admitting it. I did not do a good job with FRQ3 with my students last year. I didn't, okay? I was terrified of this problem. I thought these were so confusing, and I did the best I could with them, but and I'm not alone. I shouldn't throw other people on the bus, but we all thought this was really, really confusing. And I bet you, actually, I already know, my students didn't do well on FRQ3 last year. We get a report that breaks down how your students do. This year, you guys are all going to kill it, okay? Because what I have been doing is saying, and I'm always trying to improve. 30 years in, I'm always trying to improve to the point of driving myself crazy. I've done no less than 20 of these. I just keep doing them over and over again, thinking of the best way to explain it. And I literally had a breakthrough the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. Why didn't I see it before? And that's how I'm going to teach it to you. And you guys, I'm telling you, first and second period thought this was so easy, okay? So please don't tune out. Listen, because it looks intimidating. It's really not, okay? So what we have are 5 points. The first thing we have to do is write an equation for sine. It's not an option. It has to be sine. What that means is sine has to start where? Where does sine always start? Middle. Middle. It can go middle up or middle down, which means you can start anywhere you want on here. It can be even off of this graph, but it has to be a middle, okay? So just to make it interesting, I'm going to make this my first point. Once I explain this to you, I'll show you how to make this your first point in 2 seconds, or this your first point in 3 seconds, okay? You can literally, everybody can pick their own middle point and get the right answer. That's what makes grading this a pain, because the answers can a lot be different. Okay, so first thing you're going to do is pick your first point. Everyone's going to do that. Where is my first point? As long as it starts in the middle, any of them will do. We're going to call this the first point. Since it's not labeled, I need to figure out what it is, okay? So my first point, I know the y value, right? It's on the midline. So I know it's going to be a 0.5. Well, the x value, look, I'm counting by 4, 5, 6, 8. Oh, we're counting by 2s. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. What would make this point would be 2. Yeah. So just to make sure you guys are clear, this is my first point. Ours, because we're doing the same one together, okay? Now, what do you want to know? Oh, you want to know A, B, C, D. Okay. I always start with midline. I keep telling you that. We always start at the midline. It's the easiest thing to start with. It's labeled. It's where you say, whenever you say middle, it's that y value, middle up, middle down, middle. So D is 0.5. Midline leads you to your amplitude. Here, any of them, anywhere you want to go from your mid to a max or mid to a min. Now, this is vertical height, right? This is how far from here to here. So we have to look at the y values, okay? So, oh no, we've got decimals. Let's get that out of the way. You won't have a calculator here. So if I want to know the distance from here to here, I could do 1.75 minus 0.5. And maybe you can do that in your head. Think of money. If I have $1.75 and I take 50 cents away, what do I have left? 1.25. But if you needed to do it by hand, you would just do the top one minus the bottom one. That just gives you the distance, right? Just subtract those two numbers, line your decimal points up, and that would be 1.25. Now, let's do period. Remember, because I need B, I have to find my period first. Period is how much of the x-axis do I use to make 5 points? Any 5 points. Any 5 points. You can start here and figure out how far out it goes for 5 points and use that to measure it. You could use these 5 points. You could use these 5 points. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go with the 5 that are already printed here. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's the distance from, so this is horizontal distance, looking at x's, from 4 to 12, how much of the x-axis is that? You can count on your fingers, or do the same math here. Take the one furthest to the right, right? 12 minus 4 is 8, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I use 8 pieces of the x-axis. When you start at 0, it's a lot easier. Remember this problem we just did here? From 0 to 12, how long is that? That's 12. You didn't really need a math problem. But if you needed to, you could do 12 minus 0 and get 12, right? You just don't have to do it. So from 12 to 4 is 8. Or I could have done from 10 to 2, right? Any 5 points. No matter what 5 points you pick, the period won't change. So period is 8. Let's find B, which we've done this formula 5 trillion times. 2 pi on top always. Simplify that fraction without a calculator. 2 over 8 is 1 over 4. Pi over 4, sorry. So 1/4. Oh, yeah. Pi over 4. So that's my B. Now let me tell you something. No matter, so the only thing that's going to change between me and Raja, Dan, anybody, the only thing that can change here is what we choose as our first point. I'll show that to you in a second. So the only number here that will change is C. This is the only value that will be different from student to student to student. The midline's not going to change. The period doesn't change. And by the way, the amplitude doesn't change. The only thing that could happen with the amplitude is you could have a flip. So this could be a negative 1.25 if it changed the pattern a little bit, but it's still 1.25. The only thing that's going to change is the C. C is what gave all of us the biggest headache last year. And this is where my breakthrough was. How do I teach you guys what the phase shift is if this is my first point? It's so easy. Where do we start our graph if there's no phase shift? 0. What did I do? If I'm starting at 2, how far from 0 am I? I am right. It's important what direction, okay? I am right to, right, 0 and then to the right 2, positive 2, right 2 from 0. That is my C. That's my phase shift. I started at 0, but nope, I shifted to the right 2. When you go to the right, is that positive or negative? Opposite, right? It's got to be, so don't forget that. Remember that stuff in the parentheses is opposite. So when we go to the right, it's negative. That's the answer, okay? Now, let me show you something. What if, now I'm just going to cross this out just to make sure you guys are clear. What if I call this my first point, okay? Middle, down, middle, up, middle, okay? So if I call this my first point, watch what happens. This is how fast it would be. My midline won't change. My period won't change. My amplitude won't change. But is it negative? Look, middle, down, middle, up, middle. Is that a flip? Yes. This is where I'm going against something I told you before. This is not asking what is the amplitude, which is always positive. This is asking what the A value is. This is the one time you can put a negative in front of it. You don't write flip, okay? I have to decide when I teach you something, what's the best way to help you remember. There's a test question coming up that's what's the amplitude. I give you an equation, I say what is the amplitude? And I give you positive choices and negative choices. You're never going to choose a negative number for an amplitude, okay? You can have amplitude's always positive with a flip. But here, we're not even writing the equation. This is not multiple choice. You are literally saying what the A, the B, the C, and the D are. So you would show if any of these are negative, just like the C. Notice I didn't write C. I put the actual value, negative C. So in these situations, in this situation only, you can put a negative on your A. Okay? So we'll keep practicing. We'll practice a lot. All right. Now, C, how far from 0 am I if this is my first point? Right, 6 from 0, right? From 0, it's always from 0. So that would be negative 6. Both of these full credit. Both of these, if I plug them in here, called this y sub 1, y sub 2, would be the same graph. So you can see, so we always have kids on this AP, so I begged the math gods last year not to give me question 3 to grade. We don't get to pick, they assign you one. And I was so glad I didn't have to grade it, because I wasn't super clear on this question before. Plus, you can pick any middle you want. You could pick this one, which is going to change really just the C, right? Now I see that a lot clearer. But you get kids that want to be fancy, and they might rename this one. They'll figure out what this one is, or this one. Any middle, it doesn't matter. It's going to change possibly the sign of your A, and it will always change your phase shift, how far from 0 are you, okay? Let's finish this, and we'll do one more. So this is exactly what comes after that, okay? Refer to the graph of H in part A. The t-coordinate of K we're going to call t sub 1, and the t-coordinate of P is t sub 2. So what they're asking is from the interval t1 to t2, which they gave us here is K to P, we're going to answer a question about it. So let me just go back up here and look, K to P, and I made a mess of my graph. We're only looking at this section of the graph right here, okay? On that interval from K to P, and those letters will change from question to question, but it'll be some section of the graph. Is it positive and increasing, positive, decreasing, which one? This is multiple choice, okay? And so let me break that down. First of all, we know increasing and decreasing. We've been talking about that a lot. Increasing or decreasing is just saying, does it look like a positive slope or does it look like a negative slope, okay? So when the graph is increasing or decreasing, we're talking about what does it look like? Is it going up like a positive slope or down? So this is increasing, right? That graph is increasing. We're going up. Positive literally means what is the sign of the y values, okay? Are my y values positive or negative? They are positive. So you can get rid of those two. And we said increasing, so it's A, okay? Literally, are we above the x-axis, positive, or are we below the x-axis? And you can tell that just by looking at the signs of the y values, not the x values, okay? Last part, how many times have we talked about this? No one's really remembered this, though. This is kind of worrying me. On that same interval, the same one we just talked about, what's the concavity? Would you guys call this concave up or concave down? Right, okay, everyone remembers that. I shouldn't say that. We are concave down. But what is the rate of change on that? Is the rate of change increasing or decreasing? I or D? I can't tell what you guys are saying. D. Rate of change. Do you remember the trick? There's a trick. Anybody remember it? Down, decreasing. D. Concave down is always decreasing. So concave up is the other one. Increasing, okay? So this is what your test is going to look like next week and what your AP exam. Same exact 3 questions We'll just add on to it for the AP exam. All right, let's do another one. Okay. Same directions. Points are there for us. Always need to look at what it's asking for. This is another sign one. Sign always starts in the what? Fill in the blank. Middle. Pick a middle. Let's use this one. Why not? Always pick your first point. That's important. Then let's start identifying stuff. Start with the midline. What's the midline, guys? 2. Right here. The dotted line. It'll always be the dotted line, plus it's where all your middles are. The midline leads me to my amplitude. So from here to here, that's vertical, right? So look at the x's. From 2 to 4 is what? 2. Now you're going to decide, because you already know what your first point is that a flip? You start in the middle, that means sign, and then middle down, yep, that's a flip. Period. Find 5 points. Well, here's 5 points. And the period is horizontal as well. So it's negative 0.5, guys watch, minus negative 2.5. This is getting our period. Okay? This is without a calculator. Whenever you have a minus and a negative, they cancel each other out. And we're adding different signs, which actually means you subtract. If you take a half away from 2.5, what do you get? 2. So B is 2 pi divided by 2 or 5. Remember, all these numbers, no matter what your first point is, are non-negotiable. Everybody should have these same numbers. Now, you might not have a flip, right? If I had used this point, it wouldn't have been a flip because it would have been middle up. But everything else would be the same. Now we need our phase shift. Be careful with negative numbers. I'm calling this my first point. I went what direction and how far from 0? I went where? Left 2, right? I was at 0, 0. That's always your starting point. And I went left 2. That's how I landed here. So is that going to be plus 2 or minus 2? Or just 2? That's it. That's your answer. Do we get it? Not hard, right? I don't think so. All right, so same word problem. Same problem, sorry. Now they're saying from J to K. So the letters will change in here. It's not always the same letters. So that's from here to here. Right? Are those positive or negative? Positive. When they're asking positive or negative, it's this part right here is looking at the y values. It's always the y values. So be careful. You can see right there that that could be a place that we make a mistake. We are positive. Remember, it's hard to see because you're not seeing a graph that looks like that, right? You have to look at the values, but it's saying we're above the x-axis, okay? So that would be positive, so that's 50-50, and would you say increasing or decreasing? Increasing. Concave what? Concave up. Rate of change is increasing. So notice they use that increasing and decreasing twice. This is the graph increasing or decreasing? That's the slope, kind of, like what you would say. And rate of change is related to concavity. Okay? So I gave you one to do, and I'll put the key up. If you pick a different first point, please don't copy mine. See if you can do it without copying. See if you can do it. It's homework. It's not going to count against you. If you get something different than me, call me over. I will check to see if your answer would be acceptable or not. Okay? So when you're done with this, guys, I'll give you guys time to study. Who's taking it, please? Okay, a big number. I'll give you guys a minute. So real quick, I'm going to offer you guys the test review early. Look, let me prove to you. Look, look, look. Remember, my test review is just like the test. Here's day one's FRQ. Looks a little familiar, right? Same exact type of question. Here's day two's FRQ. I gave you the same FRQ both days, just like this. So now might be a good time to take this and work on those two while it's fresh in your mind. It's up to you. Just throwing that out to you. Work on your makeup work, whatever. Yeah. Anybody want to talk to you early about doing that? Oh, this is the testing. That means I'm doing the testing. Starting how I find it, but if you want to start early, it's up here. So if you're going to take the quiz, I'm going to give you guys, there's still people working on this, so I want to give you guys time to work on it. Study if you're wanting to. If you're taking the quiz, guys, make sure you know your quadrantals. That is what I'm marking wrong again. The quadrantals. 0 on top is 0. 0 in the bottom is undefined. Yes. When that comes back.